Hello and welcome back to Techerati 2019, live at London Excel. It's Will and Bill here actually for this part of this, what would you say, afternoon, mid-afternoon time. It's really heating up here in terms of warmth as well, but no, there's a real good buzz going on at the expo today and also yesterday as well. It was a great day, wasn't it, Bill?
Well, it was. There's been a really good footfall here. I've been impressed by the number of people coming to the show and also the variety of different sponsors. It's actually a vast show, and you've got everyone here from blockchain right through to IoT, to data center, to cloud and security. It's an enormous breadth, and we've been very lucky in the fact that we've been honoured to have a number of experts come along. And the next one in this great lineup is David Lofts, who is CEO for Ethical ICO. David, please do us the honour of introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what your background is, as what your focus is here today.
Well, my original background is in marketing, actually, global consumer finance and automotive, and you name it, I've probably marketed it.
So how did you fall into this then?
I got involved in an ICO. And very quickly learned my lesson.
Yes.
And kind of came out of the whole crypto anarchist side of this industry into something which I've now come to discover is actually a force for good, rather than the whole kind of idea that crypto is only of any use for criminals buying drugs or that kind of thing.
It can be a force for good, and there is obviously an ethical approach that you're seeking to champion, but to a large extent, to date, it's been a little bit like the Wild West out there. And what do you think the steps that we need to take to actually introduce that sort of ethical approach and try and make the blockchain and the crypto and the ICO environment grow up a bit?
Well, I think I probably have to start with regulation, actually.
I think that's coming.
And I'm not going to talk about Brexit, but...
What? Yeah.
There's always Brexit and then but.
Yes. But the EU are 2 or 3 years ahead of us in terms of regulation.
Yep.
We have put together a steering committee, written evidence has been provided, the FCA and government have issued a white-ish paper.
Yes.
But it just doesn't go far enough, and it is a bit like Brexit, kind of indecisive in terms of what it recommends and what we should be doing. And ultimately, if you're talking about raising funding through crypto for blockchain-related projects, at the end of the day, the investor needs to be protected.
Yes.
And currently there is absolutely nothing in place for that. I actually reported somebody to the FCA and the fraud squad for a fraudulent ICO, and both organisations turned around to me and said, well, were you an investor in this? And I said, well, no, I was a partner. And they said, well, I'm sorry, we can't help you. You weren't an investor. There is no regulation.
Yeah. It is truly the Wild West out there. We're looking for the sort of regulation, and I'm totally behind you that we're a step or two behind the Europeans, but there are other parts of the world where it is truly a free-for-all.
Yeah.
And we're looking for some form of harmonisation of regulations, because it's just going to be regulatory arbitrage. If we clamp down a bit here, they'll move somewhere where they can get away with it.
Well, where are those markets for starters as well? That's what I would like to know too. So I don't know.
Well, in terms of totally unregulated markets,
it's just...
well, you read every other day in Cointelegraph and whatever that China has banned cryptocurrency and then it's unbanned cryptocurrency, and who actually knows? I'm not.
But famously, regulation in China works in a number of different ways, depending on how well connected you are. And if you are well enough connected, you can get away with all sorts.
Yeah, I think that's very true in many markets. Actually.
I'm not saying that it isn't.
And it's not even necessarily the level of connection. I think it's to do with how much money you've got at the end of the day. And unfortunately, we are seeing that the crypto industry, and I keep going back to the idea that crypto is a great thing and it could do a lot of good in the right hands, but much like fiat and wealth in general, it has amassed up here, and 80% of it is owned by a very small proportion of people.
But also, but the technology is not fundamentally bad. There is nothing wrong with the technology at all.
The technology is amazing and can do wonderful things.
All we have to do is regulate its use.
Yes, but I think that starts with regulating cryptocurrency.
Absolutely.
And I never thought I would be saying this. Because I'm kind of a libertarian in outlook. I'm kind of significantly left on the social spectrum.
So at what point did it dawn upon you that regulation was a necessity? At what point did you suddenly realise, well,
when I suddenly started getting hundreds of emails from investors who felt that they'd been ripped off.
Right.
And they had no recourse, none whatsoever.
Do you think there will be, there was a few years back, there was a big bubble, wasn't there, with crypto?
Well, back end of 2017,
yes. Yeah. Do you think that era is ever going to come back again for
No.
crypto, or you think that's done?
I don't see that coming back. I'm not one of those people. So the market currently is the fundraising market in this area is currently pretty deflated. I think we've hit about 250-ish million raised so far this year, which is about 20-25% of the same period last year.
I think a lot of the early euphoria has been replaced by a lot of wariness because people have seen some of the difficulties that have gone on.
Yeah.
And it's not gone unnoticed, and rightly so.
Yeah. But I think, and I'm a little plug here.
We always like that.
Go for it.
My company is focused on not just blockchain but use of cryptocurrency to actually do what I think Satoshi intended to do with it, which is to level the playing field between rich and poor.
Yeah, that was always the potential.
That to me, that's what I get out of the Satoshi white paper. There are other things besides, and I'm not one of these, kill the banksters and all of that. That's a nonsense. The sum total of the entire collective cryptocurrency value in the world currently is about the same as the GDP of Birmingham. So that kind of puts that into perspective. Yeah. It's not going to kill the banksters, certainly not in the next 100 years. And
do they still see it as a threat, though? Nonetheless,
I don't think they've ever seen it as a threat. Maybe they see blockchain as a threat because it's a very, very efficient and cost-effective payment rail. As you've seen with Ripple, now everybody who has a negative opinion of Ripple will say, well, it's a centralized thing and it's not, so it's not proper crypto and it's not blockchain and whatever. But it's actually working. It's doing something. It is attracting clients, and those clients are the banks, and it means that the banks are adopting blockchain, and therefore that gets into the public domain. And we have the public using blockchain by transacting with banks.
Absolutely, and whilst people may have been dismissive in the higher echelons around cryptocurrencies, there are lots of very large organizations now looking at blockchain in a wider perspective, and obviously we've had the recent announcement by Zuckerberg that they're going to include end-to-end encryption across all their messaging, but at the same time they're looking at blockchain themselves. They've seen what WeChat are doing in China or across payments over their social network, and I think inevitably we're going to see Facebook and Zuckerberg moving in that direction themselves. I'm not sure that the announcement they made recently about end-to-end privacy and encryption is entirely innocent.
I can't see that happening.
Yeah. Unfortunately, gentlemen, we're going to have to wrap things up there quickly because we're going to have to run to another ad. Well, not an ad break, but we're going to have to run to a break nonetheless. Okay. David, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you very much.
Giving your insight on all things blockchain and cryptocurrency.